Carolina This Week with Tim McGinnis.
Good morning and welcome to Carolina This Week. The new 7th Congressional District Representative Tom Rice has been at work in Washington for just about a month now. Representative Rice is here with me this morning. Thanks for coming in.
Tim, I'm honored to be here as always. It's a great opportunity and love to reach out to you and get the opportunity to speak to my constituents a little while.
Well, there's a lot to talk about. A lot's been happening up in Washington. It seems like I think every new session is a historic session with what you all have to tackle. And once again, I think we're going to see some probably landmark legislation come out of this one way or another.
It has been an interesting time. You know, baptism by fire. They started us off right in the fire.
Now, one of the first things you had to deal with when you got up there was the decision to raise the debt ceiling.
Yeah, it actually started before I got up there, where they were dealing with the fiscal cliff in the last few days before I was sworn in. So I spent that last week in Washington because I wanted to hit the ground running, and I attended a lot of the conference sessions where they were debating their tack on the fiscal cliff. It was very, very interesting, and you know, the whole process of that is, I think, a microcosm of the problems in Washington, where that fiscal cliff was a combination of 4 problems that were all converging at the same time. One was the expiration of the Bush tax cuts, which Congress and the President had agreed to 2 years before that to expire on January 1st, 2013. And then the new taxes under the Obamacare law, which had been agreed to when in Obama's first 2 years, which were going to hit on January 1st, 2013. Then it was the expiration of payroll tax cuts, which they agreed to a year before, which was going to happen on January 1st, 2013. All these things coming together at one time, and you know, it wasn't by accident. It wasn't that they didn't see it coming. They knew it was coming. They set it up to happen right after the election. And you know, they could have taken those 2 years, a year and a half. They knew all this stuff was coming, and sequestration was the other thing, where the big cuts in spending, particularly defense spending. They knew all those things were going to be a big drag on the economy. They knew that that they were all coming. They could have taken that time. The Republicans put forth a couple of plans. The Senate never took them up. The President never took them up. They could have either negotiated the Republicans' plans or put forth their own plans and tried to come up with something that made sense for the country, that would move the country forward. But they chose not to do that. And why?
Elections.
Because of elections. Because it was more important to get reelected than it was to actually deal with the country's problems and push the country forward. And then when the November 7th, the day after the elections, they run around like, you know, Will Robinson's robot, you know, danger, danger, fiscal cliff. Oh, what are we going to do? And the result was that they messed around until the day before the new Congress was being sworn in, and the law was actually approved by Congress in the wee hours of the night, only hours before we were sworn in. And the law that was passed was not good for the economy, wasn't good for anybody, does very little for our deficit, does very little to encourage job production or economic development. And it was just a thrown together last minute thing. And I think Washington has been reduced to crisis management. I think that we don't have a long-term view. We only deal with things, you know, when they absolutely have to. We lurch from one crisis to the next, and we will continue to do that.
Well, and again, one of the first roll call votes you had as a congressman was to, again, temporarily raise the debt ceiling to get us through May.
Well, think about that now. Here, you know, we come in and the debt ceiling vote comes in January, 3 weeks after we get there. Then we have and we extend it for 3 months, because that's a long-term view in Washington these days. And next we have the sequestration, which was the result of the 60-day extension. It's on March the 1st. That's the next crisis that's coming. And then the next crisis is the continuing resolution, which funds day-to-day government operations, and that'll hit about the end of March. And then we have the May the 15th, I think, is the date that we agreed to continue the debt ceiling. So crisis, 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 and it's going to continue until we begin to take a long-term view. this stuff about governing for 3 months is completely ridiculous. It's like kindergarten stuff. How can a business plan, how can they possibly forecast what they're going to need to do? How can, when you think about businesses directly affected, like defense contractors who are wondering, if they're going to build the F, whatever the number is now, 32 or not, based on the sequestration rules. I mean, I'm sure those plans have already been written off. They can't turn those projects on a dime. Those people have already been laid off. But the businesses that are indirectly affected, an accounting business that's thinking about buying a computer or a sock manufacturer that doesn't know what the economy is going to be like. He can't plan based on the actions of our government. Not if we're making our plans for 3-month crises. We've got to take an adult view of this. I mean, we've forgotten how to manage. This is management 101 stuff, and until we do, we're going to continue not to be something that pushes the economy forward. The government's actually a huge drag on the economy.
Yeah, we've already heard from some business owners because of that fiscal cliff deal. The IRS pushed filing back to the 30th, and some business owners are worried because those returns aren't going to be coming in time to meet forecasts and meet that type of thing, because they expect people to take their return checks in to make deposits on big ticket items and that type of thing.
Our government should be looking at the big picture and should take a long-term view to foster growth and encourage economic development. And what we're doing right now is we are taking the opportunity to snipe at every plan that's put forward for political points rather than to try to adopt. It's more important to do that in the eyes of certain politicians than it is to adopt a plan that greases the skids for job creation, for economic development, and so forth.
And I have to say, just from the observer's standpoint, this is a bipartisan problem. It's not a Republican problem, and it's not a Democrat problem. Both parties share some blame.
I would say there have been problems on both sides in the past, but I will also say that the Republicans last May put forth a plan. It was an alternative to sequestration. The Republicans last May put forth a plan that would have avoided a lot of the fiscal cliff issues, and the Democrats never responded. The Senate in particular would not respond. Harry Reid would not respond because he didn't want his senators on record as to what they could believe, what they believed, so that they wouldn't be subject to attack in election.
Well, let's look at the Senate for a minute, because these are two different chambers. Obviously, you have a quarter of the membership in the Senate, but they are able to come up with a bipartisan immigration plan. Mm-hmm. I don't remember the last bipartisan plan to come out of the House.
No, you're right about that. I think that there are some things that there are some bipartisan work being done, and in fact, some of my freshman members are working on a bipartisan plan right now with respect to entitlements, but hopefully it'll be coming out. But no, the bipartisan immigration plan is obviously a good step for the Senate.
Let's talk about that. What do you like and what don't you like about this immigration reform plan? Obviously, there are some elements of amnesty in there. There are some. It's a multifaceted plan, and it seems like there's something in it for just about everyone to hate.
Here's my frustration on immigration. That we have a lot of laws on the books. I guess step back to square one. I think that we as a sovereign country should be able to decide who we allow to immigrate into our country, period. Whether that be done through, quotas or classes or, specific people, that decision ought to be able to be made by us or any other country in the world. We ought to be able to decide who can come in. If otherwise, we just should, open our borders up and let everybody come through who wants to and not ask any questions. But if we're not going to do that, we should be able to decide as a sovereign nation who comes in this country. We can't, and the reason we can't is because we don't control our borders. People come through almost at will, it seems, and we have no effective mechanism of dealing with that. So any plan that's put forth, whether it be this Senate plan, whether it be the one that George Bush put forth 10 years ago, whether it be the any other plan, or just simply enforce the laws we have. Those laws are meaningless if we don't control our borders. If we say, okay, we're going to, just forget about all the wrongdoing of the 11 million people that are here, and give them all a free pass and we're only going to allow 1 million people a year to come in from now on. That's meaningless if we don't control our borders. So until we have some kind of a plan to deal with that, we're the greatest country on earth. I hope that we have the capacity to deal with our border problem. If we don't, I think that we're arguing about it's just a bunch of air until we can deal with that.
A lot of observers who are looking at the plan are saying that Republicans realized in the last election how important the Hispanic vote is. I don't think it really counts in the 7th district quite as much as it does in other parts of the country, but it's growing.
If that's true, then why did George Bush put forth his pathway to citizenship 10 years ago?
Yeah.
He did.
Mm-hmm.
I think he realized it before the Democrats did. Mm-hmm. Now the Democrats are taking credit, and everybody's jumping on board because I think you agree. I think everybody agrees that they're all fighting over, who gets the credit from the Hispanic population. But, to say that the Republicans have been against immigration is nonsense. George Bush's plan got shot down, 10 or 12 years ago.
Well, I don't think it's that Hispanics are necessarily against Republicans, but the polls show it, that they showed up in force for Democrats more than Republicans. So Republicans need to get out in front on the issue.
Yeah, I agree. In this election and before, they were, this is the first election when it's been that skewed. I think they've always gone predominantly Democrat, but they've been a lot more Republican up until now. And I understand. I understand the statement that, a lot of the Republican rhetoric sounds anti-Hispanic. I'm certainly not anti-Hispanic. I certainly believe that there ought to be some reasonable, rules. But the problem is that we can't enforce the rules. So why even have them?
Right.
If we're going to put rules in place other than the laws that we already have, we ought to be able to enforce them, and that starts with being able to control the border.
Okay. Immigration, a touchy issue. So is gun control, another one that's coming up, and you're going to have to make some decisions on probably in the coming months.
I sat down with being a new congressman is an interesting experience, and I learned, I hadn't really thought about it until I was elected, but I learned that normally when you beat an incumbent or you take the seat of a retiring incumbent, he has a staff in place that knows the district and has offices in the district. A lot of them from the district. We didn't have any of that because it's a brand new seat. We had to start from scratch. And so, we're learning together, and we're doing, I hired an experienced chief of staff, and most of the people in my Washington office have come out of other Washington offices, but they're all from South Carolina except for my chief of staff. And we're learning each other. I sat down with my communications person last week to find out exactly, how it was going. And I looked at her report. I think we had about 930 communications, either emails, phone calls, letters, in the 3 weeks that I had been a congressman. And of those 930, about 750 were about the Second Amendment. Pretty amazing statistic, isn't it?
I want to start talking about it after we take a quick break.
All right.
We'll be right back. Welcome back. Congressman Tom Rice is our guest this morning. We were talking before the break, basically about 70 to 80% of all the communication that has been had between constituents in your office has been about the Second Amendment.
That's correct.
So gun rights are going to be a pretty big topic of discussion coming up, and a lot of people are going to be watching to see what you're going to do.
Oh, absolutely. And I wasn't really all that surprised by that. South Carolina has certainly a history of independence and don't tread on me, and I don't want to do anything to infringe anybody's constitutional rights. I think that the right to bear arms is clearly protected in the Constitution, and I'm going to do everything I can to make sure that's continued.
But some would say, did our forefathers really envision assault rifles, massive magazines, and the type of world that we live in today?
I clearly understand the argument, but I don't think that abridging people's rights to bear arms will solve the problem. It hasn't solved the problem in Chicago, where the right to bear hold weapons is severely restricted, and it's one of the murder capitals of the world. It didn't solve it when they had the assault weapons ban in 1994 through 2004, and I don't think it'll solve it today. I think where the issue lies is in mental health, and I think we've got to do a better job of identifying people with mental health issues and making sure they get the treatment they deserve rather than restricting the rights of law-abiding gun owners.
And you've been in county government your political career, and you know how tough it is on the local governments who a lot of the mental health responsibilities fall to the state, and then the state says we can't afford to take care of it, it falls to the county. County can't afford to take care of it, and basically a lot of people end up with nowhere to go. Treatment just isn't an option until somebody's almost arrested for some type of crime.
Right.
How do you get out ahead of that without being able to really, without having a way to reach out to some of these people?
Well, you know, I think when, at some point when these people touch the system, there needs to be a recognition of that in their background, and that should be picked up when they purchase a weapon. I know that there are holes in the system. I know we can do better than that. And we should. And we need to do everything we can to make sure that happens. But abridging somebody's constitutional right to bear a weapon, taking away guns from law-abiding citizens is not the answer.
Background checks at gun shows?
You know what? It's hard for me to argue against that. I think that when people buy guns, that they ought to be subject to a background check. I don't think we should be putting weapons in hands of people who might harm themselves or others.
Okay. Anything else you want to talk about the gun discussion as it's going to get bigger and bigger?
No, I think my position's pretty clear on that. I'm very comfortable. You know, I grew up hunting. My father taught me to handle firearms and hunt, and his father taught him, and his father taught him, and I passed it on to my children. And I've got, you know, each one of my sons have rifles and shotguns, and of course we don't have any assault weapons, although I'm not really sure how you define assault weapon. You know, we've got, all my sons when they were young, I bought them little squirrel rifles, little 22 squirrel rifles, semi-automatics, and every one of them hold, I think, 18 shots. You know, you drop them down the little sleeve in the barrel. Is that an assault rifle?
I don't know what actually will qualify it. I think some of these more military-looking ones, you know, we hear about the AR-15.
Military-looking. Is it how it looks? Is it because it's black and has a handle on top and has a composite stock? I mean, I don't know. What is an assault rifle?
Yeah.
If it's based on the number of bullets it holds and it's a semi-automatic, then are these squirrel rifles assault rifles? Because if they are, then my kids have one. And that was not my intent when I bought it. And and they've never been and never will be used in an assault on anybody.
Right.
So, you know, hunting is a great tradition in my family, and again, I don't see that abridging people's constitutional rights to bear arms is the answer to this problem.
All right. Let's take a quick break. When we come back, we'll just talk about your impressions of Washington a month into the job.
Okay, sounds great.
All right, we'll be right back. Welcome back. Congressman Tom Rice, my guest this morning. I have to point out real quick, I really want to thank you for something. I forgot my phone at the gym today, and I didn't have a timer to time the show, and he was kind enough to lend me his phone so I could time the show. Thank you, Tom.
No problem at all. I'll get the rent later.
You'll get the rent later. Washington so far, what are you, do you think that as a freshman congressman, are you going to be heard up there? You're kind of low man on the totem pole right now.
Well, that's true, Tim, but you know, there are 80 incoming freshman congressmen. 80. It's 20% of the total Congress. And I've been very blessed to spend a fair amount of time with leadership. I think we'll make an impact. Is it going to be as large as if I'd been there for 6, 8, 10 years? No, but I think we'll make an impact. They put me on some very good committees. Transportation infrastructure, I think, is great for this area. Budget, you know, I'm a tax lawyer and CPA. I think they recognize my expertise and want to use it. I get to be on the budget committee with Paul Ryan in the next 3 months when we're dealing with these large picture issues, the continuing resolution, the debt ceiling, and no, I'm really excited about that. I think that we have real chances to positively affect the future of the country and of this district.
Transportation and infrastructure, got to ask the question that's at least in the back of some people's minds, I-73.
You know, we've had one meeting on transportation and infrastructure, and that was just an introductory meeting. Mr. Schuster seems very open to hearing the issues of the districts. I plan to, at some point, try to get him down here and maybe some other members and let them see our problems face to face. I-73 is certainly a high priority, and the Georgetown Port are two high priorities. Meeting with the Army Corps of Engineers on Friday in Georgetown to talk to them about that particular issue. So I'm going to do everything I can to educate people about the infrastructure problems in this district. When you sit here and you look at our 8 counties and you recognize that not one of them is even at the state unemployment average, when you recognize that our wages are so far below the national average, when you look at the allocation of our state's resources from the federal government and from the state up and down the I-26 corridor historically, I think it's time that some of our infrastructure needs get met. Now, I recognize that the federal government doesn't have the money that it has had, but I've said all through my campaign, I've said it to you repeatedly, I don't see construction of infrastructure as spending money. What it is investment. Now, you can't invest in just anything. You've got to invest in projects that have a viable return. And I think that we have made the case over and over again that I-73 is a viable project that will produce a very strong return. Return in terms of economic development, return in terms of jobs, return in terms of taxes produced.
All right. Well, we will be looking forward to see what happens out of your session up in Congress.
Thank you, sir.
Thanks for coming in to talk to us.
I'm honored to be here as usual.
I'll give you your phone back.
All right, good.
All right.
$5.
$5. Stay with us. We'll be right back.